بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. This is a brief talk, as the listeners have realized, entitled An Invitation to Islam, or What is Islam? Because the focus of this talk is knowing how to present Islam correctly to someone who isn't Muslim. Also, perhaps a non-Muslim will come across these words and thus will learn what Islam is and what its core beliefs are, and hopefully will be given the success to accept it after understanding it. So we don't want to waste time, and let us get straight into the topic. And for one to understand Islam as a religion, one must understand its foundations, because all people, without exception, act as a result of their foundational beliefs, their inner beliefs. There's no escaping it. Everyone's inner beliefs and convictions, whatever they may be, that they hold within their hearts, have an effect on their actions as a whole and the way they approach this life on earth, without a doubt. And thus, it's like the foundations of a building. If those foundations are true and strong, the building in its entirety is strong, and one can build high upon that strong foundation. And if the foundations of that building are weak and shaky, then no doubt the building in its entirety is weak and prone to collapse. This then begs the question that we alluded to, and that is, what are the foundational beliefs of Islam? What is its foundation and core doctrine upon which a believer builds his actions? And the answer to that question is that those foundations of faith consist of 6 pillars, and they are called the 6 pillars of faith in Islam. Faith in Islam has 6 pillars, and so we'll cover each one in brief. The first pillar of the 6 pillars of faith, and it is the greatest and most important, and all the other pillars go back to this one, it is belief in Allah. And this entails believing that this universe and the creation within it was created by our Lord, and that He is in complete authority over all things, and that He gives life and causes death, and that we are part of His dominion. And this belief also entails believing in His names and attributes. His names, for example, Allah, and it means the one who is worshipped, the one who is worshipped out of love and veneration. Al-Alim, for example, of His names, meaning the all-knowledgeable. Al-Hakim, the all-wise. Al-Hayy, the all-living. Al-Malik, the king. Al-Basir, the all-seeing. Al-Samir, the all-hearing. Al-Qawi, the all-powerful. Al-Aziz, the almighty. Al-Rahim, the most merciful, and so on and so on. And these are some of His magnificent names. As for his attributes, he has all attributes of perfection and is completely free from any imperfection and any deficiency. And these include, for example, his absolute and complete knowledge of all things, his might, which allows him to carry out anything he wills, his complete wisdom in all things he does, his perfection, his seeing, his hearing, his mercy, his generosity, his justice. He is pleased with some and angered with others. He loves some and hates others. He forgives whom he wills and punishes whom he wills. He is bigger and greater than everything. He is the one and only. He has no partners and no associates. He is high above his creation, and thus the hearts can't help but turn to him in times of desperation and need. There is nothing that is similar to him, and we are his servants and a part of his creation, and all perfection belongs solely to him. This first pillar of faith also entails having firm conviction that there is nothing worthy of worship except him, and that everything that is worshipped besides him is false and in vain, whether that be a prophet or calling on some angel or some saint or some idol or whatever else may be worshipped and called upon other than him. He is the only one that deserves to be worshipped by his creation, because he is their Lord, and they are naturally inclined to loving him and venerating him and turning to him. And it is only befitting for the creation to worship their creator and only their creator. And this leads to another question. And it is, what is worship? What is worship? The core of worship and its very essence consists of having ultimate and absolute love and veneration for something. Ultimate and absolute love and veneration for something. This is worship at its core. To love and venerate something absolutely. And thus, the heart becomes wholeheartedly attached to it. It's to have your heart completely attached to something, whatever it may be. That is what you worship. That is what you worship. And this was the core message of all the prophets that were sent to mankind. Be wholeheartedly attached to your Lord and Creator, the one who created you and gave you life, the one who is in complete control of all things, the one whom you naturally know. You know him in your hearts and are naturally inclined to love him. Be wholeheartedly attached to him and make him your ultimate love and your ultimate goal and your ultimate purpose. Fear him and love him and humble your hearts to him and put your trust in him. Let him be what you hope for and what you are seeking. Seek nearness to him, because the hearts can find no comfort and no success and no salvation except through that. There is a void in the heart that can never be filled except through worshiping him and being close to him. And thus the prophets appealed to this natural inclination of mankind to seek their Lord and worship Him. It is something we feel and realize within ourselves. And we feel it, especially when one ponders and thinks deeply about the Creator and His creation. The vast heavens and the earth and its suitability for our lives, and the creatures that exist within, and the sun and the moon and the alternation of night and day, and how it all comes together. And that all these things, including ourselves, weren't created in vain. They weren't created without a purpose. And how we naturally feel an awe and appreciation and love for the maker of these things. The point is, this was the core of every message of every prophet. It says in the Quran, for example, about Noah, the first prophet to mankind. And we indeed sent Noah to his people, saying, O my people, worship Allah. There is nothing truly worthy of worship except Him. And the story of Noah is known, and how his people mocked him. And they mocked his message and denied their prophet, and they were eventually drowned and destroyed. Abraham, for example, the same message. Why, my people, are you worshipping idols that cannot avail you in any way? Why are you attached to them? Worship Allah, our Lord and Creator. And Musa came along with the same message and was sent to the children of Israel and Pharaoh, who claimed to be a god and forced people to worship him. The same core message, the same message. And Jesus as well. He said, worship Allah, my Lord and your Lord. And every prophet, other than the ones mentioned, with the same core message. Worship your Lord and Creator. Turn to Him humbly. And don't turn away. Attach your hearts to Him in magnification and love and fear and hope. This is what rectifies the hearts and amends it. And then came the final prophet, Muhammad, who was sent to all mankind. And thus, can you guess what his core message was? The same message that every prophet before him carried. He said, O people, worship Allah. There is nothing worthy of worship except Him. O people, worship your Lord, the one who created you and sustains you. Be attached to Him. Don't worship anything else, whether it be with your hearts or outwardly. Be attached to your Lord and obey Him and love Him and fear Him and hope for Him and put your trust in Him. That is the first pillar of faith in Islam in brief. The second pillar of faith in Islam is belief in the angels. And that is that there are pure angels who were created by Allah the Exalted out of light. They were created out of light, and they worship Him and carry out whatever they are ordered to do within this universe. And they never disobey their Lord. Each have appointed tasks that they carry out swiftly and perfectly, such as the angel of death, for example, or the angel Jibreel, who is responsible for bringing down the revelation to the prophets, and so on. And they don't have the evil inclinations that may exist within man. The third pillar of faith is belief in the books, and that the prophets were given great books as a guidance for their people. And some examples include the Torah given to Moses, and the Injil, or the Gospels given to Jesus, and the final and greatest of them all, the Quran, which was sent down to Muhammad. And they contain the words of Allah. They contain the words of Allah. However, all of them are either missing or have been altered, except the final one, except the Quran, the glorious Quran, which was sent down and abrogating all the previous books and scriptures, because it is the final revelation and meant for all mankind. And Allah the Exalted promised to preserve it until end times, and thus it hasn't been altered or changed in any way. And the fourth pillar of faith in Islam is belief in the prophets, and that is to believe in all the prophets that were sent to mankind, the first of which is Noah, and the final of which is Muhammad, and every prophet in between. Every prophet in between. Ibrahim, Zakaria, Ismail, Ishaq, Idris, Yaqub, Yusuf, every prophet. And not to believe in some and deny others, because they all had the same core message, as mentioned previously. And thus denying one is like denying them all. And to deny one is to deny the Lord who sent him. And by the grace and bounty of Allah, one of the easiest things to do is distinguish between a false prophet and a true prophet. And this is by the grace and bounty of Allah. One of the easiest things is distinguishing between a false prophet and a true prophet, because only two types of people claim to be prophets of God. Noble, the first. Noble, truthful, upright men who were known to be noble and truthful even before becoming prophets. The greatest men to walk the earth, who call to worshiping our Creator alone and encourage their people with every type of good and with every type of noble characteristic. And not only that, but they also come with noble books and clear signs and miracles that they are in fact true prophets. And then you have the second type. The second type who claim to be prophets. And they are the sleazy liars who seek personal gain and fame. They come with no noble books and no signs and no miracles. They are two-faced, and they always end up being humiliated in some way and exposed. They always end up being humiliated and exposed as corrupt and as liars. A liar is always exposed. Thus, the point is only two opposite extremes of people claim prophethood, which makes distinguishing between the two one of the easiest things possible. There is no gray area. It's very black and white and clear cut. And the point here is that the one who unbiasedly looks into the life of the Prophet Muhammad and what he came with and his message will realize without a shadow of a doubt that he was indeed a true prophet and was the final seal to the prophets. It is clearer than the sun in the sky on a clear day. Not to mention that the previous scriptures had informed of him. Previous scriptures had informed of him, but that's a topic for a different discussion. And this is the type of station of respect and love and nobility that the prophets hold in Islam. And this station of respect and love and nobility that the prophets hold in Islam is in stark contrast to what we find in the Bible. For example, it mentions in Genesis of the Old Testament that the prophet Lot slept with his daughters while drunk. And how can anyone attribute some despicable action like that, a nasty immorality to a prophet? And this shows that the Bible had been altered and corrupted with words of men. Or, for example, what it mentions in Exodus, that the prophet Aaron, the brother of Moses, made the calf for the children of Israel to worship. And unfortunately, there are many, many, many examples of this, not to mention the blasphemy it contains when talking about Allah the Exalted. We'll move on to the fifth pillar of faith, and it is belief in the final day, or day of judgment, or day of resurrection. Different names, and that all mankind will be resurrected for a tremendous, terrifying day, and will all stand humbly before their great Lord, and will be questioned and judged on how they responded to the messengers and what they did on earth. And no one will be saved that day except those who worship their Lord alone, without any partners, and followed what the prophets came with. And that heaven is truth, and hell is truth, and each will have its share of people who will abide in them eternally. The sixth and final pillar of faith in Islam is belief in the decree. And that is that everything that takes place was completely known to Allah before it took place. And that it's all been written, and that whatever He wills to exist will exist. And whatever He does not will to exist can never exist. And He creates things accordingly. These are the foundational beliefs of Islam. This is the unshakable foundation that other aspects of the religion go back to. This is what it all goes back to. There is no salvation except through this. Everything else is rejected. This is the way to our Lord, the Most High. This was the way of the prophets. Whoever accepts it and becomes Muslim and follows what the final prophet came with has been given tremendous success and has been promised a great reward. And the one who chooses to remain in darkness and reject the message and reject his Lord and what He wants of him, and reject the messengers, including Muhammad, has been promised the hellfire. It is the final abode of the stubborn deniers and disbelievers. In conclusion, one may ask, especially a Christian, as one Christian individual asked me once, after explaining these things to him, he said, a lot of what you mentioned is similar to the inner beliefs I was convinced of. Belief in God and the prophets and heaven and hell and so on. So I want to know what the main differences between Christianity and Islam are, and why Islam is the only accepted way in the sight of God. And this is a good question. And in brief, there are a number of differences, but the main core differences are two. The first is that Christians deem Jesus, the Son of Mary, to be a God figure, some sort of deity who is worshipped. Whereas in Islam, Jesus is deemed to be a noble prophet, one of the greatest men to walk the earth, a righteous man born a miraculous birth to a righteous woman. He was a servant to his Lord just like other prophets, and would never claim any sort of divinity or ask people to worship him. This is the Islamic position. Thus, the Muslims are in the middle of two extremes. At one extreme, there are those who persecuted him and deemed him to be a liar and a child of fornication. And on the other extreme are those who worship him and give him some share of divinity and make him a God figure, when in reality those false beliefs were a result of the Roman paganism that tainted Christianity after Jesus, son of Mary's death, as history shows. And thus the one who studies Christianity and its history realizes that the Christian doctrine is one that evolved and changed over the centuries. The second core difference is over the prophethood of Muhammad and what was revealed to him, including the Quran. And as we had mentioned earlier, the one who unbiasedly looks into his life and his message will come to know that he was truly the final seal of all the prophets. Lastly, and we'll end with this, one might say, I'm convinced of these beliefs and I accept them. How do I become a Muslim? And it is simple. The only thing one has to do to become a Muslim is express these inner beliefs that are in the heart and testify to them with the tongue. Is to express those inner beliefs and testify to them with the tongue. And thus you say, I testify that there is nothing worthy of worship except Allah, and that Muhammad is his servant and his messenger. And like that, one becomes a Muslim. Or they can say, for example, I testify that there is nothing worthy of worship except Allah, and that Muhammad is his servant and messenger, and that Jesus is the servant of Allah and his messenger, and he is Allah's word that was bestowed upon Mary, his mother, and that heaven is true and the fire is true. And with that, one becomes a Muslim. We'll end here. We'll end this brief talk here. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us sincere in seeking the truth and give us the success to follow it after realizing it. وصلى الله وسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه.